further differentiation between like mid-level players and high-level players, because there's just so many things that you can optimize in Shadowlands. And then whenever obviously they reach that point, there will become more of an expectation to further optimize your character, which of course there's, it's a double-edged sword. Having these cool things that you can optimize also means that, WoW as a game, and I've said this before, WoW as a game probably has one of the strongest meta adherence cultures possible. And it's not really Blizzard's fault, it's not the player's fault, it's just the way the game is. Because really, WoW is a...
The noble humans of Stormwind are a proud, tenacious race. Though the recent invasion of the demonic Burning Legion decimated their sister kingdom of Lordaeron, the defenders of Stormwind stand vigilant against any who would threaten the sanctity of their lands. Nestled in the foothills of Elwyn Forest, Stormwind City is one of the last bastions of human power in the world. Ruled by the Child King Anduin Wrynn, the people of Stormwind remain steadfast in their commitment to the Grand Alliance. Backed by their stalwart allies, the armies of Stormwind have been called away to fight the savage horde on distant battlefields. With the armies gone, the defense of Stormwind now falls to its proud citizens. You must defend the kingdom against the foul mongrels that encroach upon it, and hunt down the subversive traitors who seek to destroy it from within. Now,
a difficult game whenever you're doing, a mythic raid or a high-level mythic plus or high-level arena, and this is a hard game. So, if you're playing a game like Witcher 3 and you're not playing on Death March or, something like that, or even if you are, the game's not extremely challenging unless, my understanding, until you get to the DLC. But a game like Dark Souls does have a lot more meta adherence than a game like Witcher 3 or a more story-driven game that doesn't really focus a lot on difficulty. But the harder a game is, the more you're going to be influenced into picking the meta, because that's the more the meta will actually matter in terms of making a difference between you succeeding or not. And I think WoW has that problem, and then that problem is also compounded with the social expectation. And a lot of these other games are single-player games. So if you play the game and you suck or you're doing a little bit slower, then who cares? But whenever you're in WoW, you actually have to give other people that voluntarily want to play with you. And who would want to play with somebody who's handicapping themselves and holding back the entire team? And so you have the social pressure aspect and also the difficulty aspect, which makes WoW a very, very meta-heavy game, meta-driven game. And I don't think Blizzard can ever really stop that. I think the best thing that Blizzard can do is just keep changing the meta regularly without necessarily causing resentment to players who have picked the previous meta, and just keeping things fresh and keeping them new. And as long as Blizzard does that, I feel like people will appreciate being able to swap around and do different things. And I think also the ease of access of being able to play different characters actually really works in their favor. Because I remember whenever, I think this is patch 4.3, and this is back in Cataclysm, whenever they removed the cooldown on Chain Lightning, and every single person in Stormwind on the PTR for the 4.3 PTR was just sitting in Stormwind on like a Draenei Paladin, spamming Chain Lightning at the target. That means like they're Darth Sidious. And I remember thinking to myself, fuck, it's time to level Barbecue Beard. That's my shaman. And I did, and it was so fun to play my shaman then. I used to love it, and it was the same in Cataclysm. Yeah, that wasn't Cataclysm, right? And I think it might have been later, somewhere around in that time period, and it was so fun. So giving people that option to just go and play with a character without having all these other barriers to entry that are artificially created, like, Azerite, like your corruptions, like your, necklace, like, all these things, and just being able to play the game. Gear is gear, damage is damage, the game is the game, and fun is fun. I think that's really what Shadowlands has to offer, and I think they've done a great job on it. So for a lot of you guys that, you haven't really been playing the game a whole lot, I'd say that, how do you rate a game? How do you say a game is worth its money? Is it 40 hours of gameplay? I think that's usually the benchmark a lot of people use. I've gotten way more than that out of Shadowlands, and I've had a lot of fun. Would I recommend the game? I'd say so. Yeah, I think it's actually a good expansion. It missed a few things that I'm not really a big fan of. As I said, Covenant restrictions, Conduit restrictions, kind of annoying. And then also on top of that, not really a big fan of not having Master Loot and Guild Raid, especially for Mythic, but overall, I think it's definitely not just a step in the right direction. I think that it's a lot of steps in the right direction. And I've said this before, that WoW needed something to really kind of change things up and really kind of flip the script on the game to make it feel new, because everybody's just constantly, okay, new WoW expansion, 10 more levels, 3 more raids, 10 more dungeons. Wow, what else is new? And you have a certain level of boredom that kind of manifests with that. And I think Shadowlands did a very good job trying to break the mold of that as much as they realistically could. And hopefully Blizzard continues taking more chances like they did with Shadowlands. And the fact is, sometimes whenever you take a long shot, it's like in Call of Duty, right? It's like if you see somebody that's really, really far out, and like you'll see any I do this all the time, like whenever I'm streaming Call of Duty, and like you'll see any other Call of Duty streamers do this. There'll be some guy that's like a fucking 10 miles out in the field, and you will try to pop this dude off with a sniper, and there's like a 90% chance you're gonna miss. But if you hit that motherfucker, that is a clip, and everybody is spamming, for me, Bald Shroud, or whatever they want to call it. These are, and so if you hit that long shot, if you hit the long shot, everybody appreciates it and everybody respects it. And I think that's the way a lot of people are looking at with Shadowlands, and it's really great to see. So anyway, guys, good expansion. And before I finish the video, I do want to say, obviously, most people really enjoy an expansion on release, and then they start to hate it as time goes on. I really hope that's not what happens with Shadowlands, and I can say that this, compared to my experience with BFA at the same time period, I'm enjoying Shadowlands a whole lot more, and I'm looking forward to playing a lot more characters and experiencing a lot more of the game. So I'm excited about playing it, and I'm probably going to go do that right now. So thank you guys all so much for watching, really appreciate it, and it's great to actually talk about the game and be a little bit more positive and enthusiastic about it as well. So thank you guys all so much for watching, I really fucking appreciate it, and as I said, I've got the new phone now, and I've got the new camera, and hopefully this mic isn't fucked up, because if it was, that means I just wasted 25 minutes of talking. So anyway, guys, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, peace.
Myself a fan of RPGs. I've played all the big ones from Final Fantasy to Fallout, and from advanced Dungeons & Dragons to Xenoblade Chronicles, and even a few underappreciated gems that no one's ever heard of, like Pokemon. I love RPGs because they've got epic stories, fantastically realised worlds, and really nuanced systems and mechanics to get my teeth stuck into, and I suspect I'm not alone here. Why is it then that despite my love of RPGs, I've only actually finished maybe 20% of the ones I've played, and that's being pretty generous. I only just finished Final Fantasy VII, and that was after about 4 years of on and off playing it. What's more, I like most of the RPGs I've dropped. I've just not had the energy to go back to them, leaving countless battles unwon and countless stories unfinished. Why is this? Well, I think it has to do with how RPGs handle combat. Basically every RPG, whether Eastern or Western, turn-based or real-time, when you get right down to it, is oriented around combat. Leveling up stats more often than not only improves your combat ability, going on grand quests rewards you with items that make you better in a scrap, and even important narrative milestones in RPGs are more often than not marked with big boss fights. RPGs have been this way since Wizardry and Ultima kickstarted things back in '81, and even before that with Dungeons & Dragons, which was itself a mod for the incredibly dull wargame Chainmail. If you ask me, it's exactly this focus on fighting that makes designing a fun combat system for an RPG much harder than for almost any other kind of game. Because role-playing games typically need much longer playtimes to let their complex stories and systems flourish, their combat has got to keep the player engaged for that much longer, often resulting in there not being enough strategic depth or interesting mechanics to go around. Not only that, owing to the fact that RPGs are so structured around fighting, when their combat system starts to lose players' interest and trust, it's much harder to get them back. Think about all the classic examples of RPGs having frustrating combat, whether it's the obligatory Zubat genocide whenever you have to enter a cave in Pokemon, boring slugfests against bandits in Skyrim, or the necessity of grinding boring fights in Final Fantasy just to get high enough level to see the next game's story. Each of these games starts out with very enjoyable combat mechanics. The problem is that they can't sustain themselves over long periods of time. So, at the risk of biting off more than I can chew, What's the antidote to RPGs running out of steam? How can we make RPG combat systems that remain interesting after tens of hours and after hundreds of battles? Well, I think a good place to start is to break down your average RPG fight into its 3 fundamental components and analyze how we can streamline and tune up each one. Why don't I tell you what they are? Toolsets, which is to say the actions you can take in a fight, encounters, or how you interact with the baddies you'll be duking it out with, and layers, which is the systems that affect your play beyond a single battle. See, it spells out tell. I spent like an hour trying to make it spell RPG and briefly ass, but I gave it up, so have this infinitely less funny version instead. Let's start with that first one, toolsets. Your suite of abilities and options in an RPG is crucial to get right, because they inform the scope of your actions when dealing with enemies. If your means of fighting aren't interesting, then players will get bored of them long before the end of the game, like I did in the spam tank in a Borderlands. But equally, if combat is too complex, then most players will get scared off before they've really understood how it works. Something that happened to me as I tried and failed to get my head around Disgaia's insane stacking, fusing, using cats as guns-ing battle system. You might not expect it, but both of the Mario RPG franchises, that being Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi, managed to find a great balance between accessibility for new players and depth that satisfies RPG veterans. Let's look at your 2 basic attack options in both games.